Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Kufchet. Today's daf is sponsored by Mitzi and David Geffen in loving memory of Mitzi's mother, Ruth Tal Lach, Ruth Bat Miriam and Avraham Zichrono Levracha, on her 39th year at site. She was a loving wife, mother, and mother-in-law, devoted Zionist, and wonderful educator in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All four of her children made Aliyah, and her many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, as well as her great-grandchildren, all live in Israel. Okay, we're going to get started. We have a very long daf. We're going to mostly learn about the generation of the Mabul, of the flood. And we're going to see all sorts of interesting drashot, some that you're familiar with, some that will be new to you. Reminding everyone that we have a siyum next week. Crazy timing, almost Erev Pesach, but we'd love that you all join on Wednesday. And with that, we will get started. So we started with the Dor Mabul has no part in the Olam Haba. Okay, the people of the flood, no place in the world to come, and Enom Dim B'Din. So the way they seem to explain Enom Dim B'Din, they will not have Tchiyat HaMetim. They will not be resurrected when there's resurrection of the dead. Then we had a machloket about Dora Palaga and Anshe Stom, whether everyone agrees they don't have a part in the world to come, but there was a debate about whether or not they will be resurrected. So we ended with Rabbi Nechemyu, who said, Elu ve'elu Enom Dim B'Din. Okay, they won't be resurrected. The first opinion said they will be. So now the question is why? Starting with the very end of Kuf Zayin Amabet, Shne'emal, Al ken lo yakumu risha'im b'mishpat v'chata'im ba'adat tzadikim. Okay, they will not rise up. Okay, this is a pasuk. Who will not rise up? Evil people in judgment and sinners within the group of righteous people. So the way they understand this is that this is meaning they won't have judgment to be resurrected. That's the understanding here. That because it says Enom din b'din, b'din we understand, right? Then they won't stand b'mishpat, mishpat din, same thing here. So it's a reference to tchiyat metim. So now, how do we know this is referring to the people we're talking about? We need Anshe Stom and Dora Flaga. There's going to be a bit of a problem because they're actually not going to say Dora Flaga. They're going to talk about the Dora Mabul. So there's something, so it doesn't seem to jive in the Mishnah exactly because he says all the people mentioned in the Mishnah, and we already know the Dora Mabul is not going to be judged. We already saw a pasuk about that. So now they're going to say, Al ken lo yakum rishayim b'mishpat zedora mabul. You would have expected it to say zedora flaga. But okay, we'll leave that question aside. Okay, and sinners also we have the Risha'im is one, Chataim is another. Amrulo, they said to him, no, that's not the way you understand, the way we read that pasuk. That pasuk doesn't mean they won't be judged, meaning they won't be resurrected. They will be. But what does it say there? It says they won't be among the righteous. But they will be resurrected, just be resurrected with the evil people. If you remember, we talked about resurrection of the dead. There was this debate about whether evil people also get resurrected or it's only the righteous people. Miraglim, some people have this version, some people don't, whether this sentence is there or not in the Gemara, but Miraglim ein lam chedek lo'olam haba. The spies don't have a portion of the world to come. Shene'emal vayamutu anashim, or maybe it's the next one actually. No, there's one of these that some people don't have. Actually, one second. I think it's this one. Okay. Anyway, the Meraglim don't have a portion of the world to come. Shneimar v'yamutu anashim motzei dibat ra'ah. Motzei dibat ha'aretz ra'ah b'magefa lefnei Hashem. So notice in the beginning of the pasuk it says vayamutu, the people who said bad things about Israel, the 10 spies. Vayamutu ba'olam hazeh b'magefa lo'olam haba. At the end of that sentence, it says that right, first it says they're going to die, then it says in a plague. So now they say in a plague in the world to come. Dor Hamidbar Elam Chedek Lo'olam Haba, the generation of the people in the desert. This is why I think the previous one is a debate whether you need to say it, because obviously if what we're going to say is about the generation of the desert, that's going to obviously include the spies. Anyway, the people of the generation that lived in the desert, who remember all got punished because they believed the spies when they came back, right? And they all died in the desert. Also, Ein Lam Chedek Lo'olam Haba and Enom Din B'Din. Okay, nothing. They lose everything. Shene'emal b'midbar hazeh yitamu v'sham yamutu. So divrei Rabbi Akiva. So again, they're going to die in this desert and v'sham yamutu, and there they will die. Why does it have to say vayitamu and vayamutu? It must mean olam hazeh, olam haba. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he disagrees. What do you mean? Alehem Omer, there's things they talk about, the people in the desert. Listen to this pasuk. It says, Isfuli chasidai, korte briti ale zebach. Now, it never says they're talking about the people of the desert here, but he says, gather to me my chasidim, okay, which we'll talk about in a minute. Kortei briti, those who made a covenant with me, who bring zvachim, who bring sacrifices. And God's saying, gather them to me, meaning they'll be with me. Now, if we can prove this talks about the people of the desert, that's going to be our proof. Obviously, God is accepting them into the world to come and letting them be resurrected. So now, why is this the generation of the desert? Okay, the Kortei briti is pretty easy. They made a covenant with God at Har Sinai, right? They got the Torah. This was the generation that received the Torah, right? They obviously have merits. Chasidai, so there's a famous pasuk. Zacharti la chesed ne'urayich. I remember the chesed of your youth. Lechtecha charai bamidbar be'eretz lo zruah. Right? You agreed to go with me in the desert and trusted in God. So they're called chasidim also. So it must be that this pasuk is referencing them, and therefore they do have a place in the world to come. Adak Korach, ena atida la'alot. Okay, and now Adak Korach, they all got swallowed up into the ground. And now we're saying they're not going to come up out of the ground, meaning no resurrection of the dead. Shenema v'tchas alehem haaretz, the ground covered them, ba'olam hazeh. Vayovdu mitoch hakahal, they were wiped out from within the nation, lo olam haba. That's for the future. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Again, we have the same Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer debate. Rabbi Eliezer omer alehem u'omil, Hashem meimitu mechayeh, morid sha'ol v'gal. God kills and brings people back to life. God brings people down to the depths and will have them rise up. Why is this talking about Adak Porach? Because who else went down into the ground if not Adak Porach, who got swallowed up in the ground? So we have a debate about these last two, whether they have a place in the world to come and will be resurrected. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we get to the Gemara. The Gemara, as I said, we're going to deal just today with Dor HaMabul. Dor HaMabul en lo chelek la'olam haba. So the generation of the flood has no part in the world to come. Shenei mal. And God wiped out everything that was on, right? Everything that existed that was on the ground. Now, if you continue in that pasuk, it says, right, me'adam ad be'ema, ad remes, ad ofa shamayim, meaning, right, man, animals, everything. Vayimachu min haaretz. And then it says, and he wiped them out from the land. Now, we just said he wiped them out from the land. Why do you say it twice? Okay, we're used to this. Vayimach et kol yakum ba'olam hazeh, vayimachu min haaretz la'olam haba divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, that's Rabbi Akiva. Again, he's into this. He keeps saying this. Says it double. And by the way, this fits with Rabbi Akiva, who's always saying the Torah is written in, you can darshan every single word. It's not written b'lashon b'nei Adam, and therefore we can darshan every word. Rabbi Yehuda ben Batera Omer, lo chayim v'lo nidonim. Okay, they don't get life in the world to come, and they won't get judged, meaning no olam haba. How do we know this? Okay, so he's not really disagreeing. He's just adding the lo danim, right? That they won't get tchiyan mitim, which Rabbi Akiva didn't relate to. Shene'amar lo yadon ruchi ba'adam la'olam, lo din v'lo ruach. Okay, we saw this before in the Mishna. This is the opinion in the Mishna. Now, I want to talk about this for a minute because we're going to see this a lot of times today. This is the section. There's a section at the end of Parshat Breshit where we have these people from the Bnei Elohim, kind of sound like they're living in the heavens. They come down and they have relations with the Benot Hadam, and it's a terrible thing. And it says all these, right? It says in there also, Lo Yadom Ruchi B'Adam, God gets very upset. And then the next thing that happens is Noach, basically. So what they're saying is these psukim, even though they're not referencing the Dor HaMabul as we might think about it, because we always talk about there's Hamas and it was robbery and theft and all that, we're going to get there. But this was what they were doing before that. In other words, these were all the same. This was the generation of the same people, basically, because it's what came right before. So what happens there must be also describing the people of that generation. So therefore, since God said, okay, it's somehow connecting these two stories, even though they're not. Here's a different interpretation. We said ruach is olam haba, and din is tchiyan mitim. Now we're going to say ruach is tchiyan mitim, which also makes sense. My breath, my wind, right? Like bringing them back to life. Shelo tehei nishmatan chozeret linidana. That their neshama won't go back into their gufot. Okay, their souls, their ruach, the spirit, right, won't go back into the bodies. Rabbi Menachem bar Yosef Omer, afilu b'sha'ah shakadosh baruch hu machzir neshamot l'fgarim metim. This, by the way, is the language in our bracha we say every morning, which really is not bringing, this says, right, when God brings back the souls into the bodies of the dead people, this is really talking about the resurrection of the dead. We say it more in a blessing, like we're thankful that God returned our soul to our body in the morning. Nishmatan, because we believe that, there's a theme that, perhaps we have like a little bit of death every night when we go to sleep. Nishmatan kasher lehem begehenom. Now, what he says is they are going to be brought back to life, but it's going to be a very rough bringing back to life. And we're going to see right now what that means. Shenemal. They're going to bring a pasuk, ta'aru chashash tildu kash. Okay, this is you're going to birth like straw and hay. Ruchachem esh tochalchem. Now, what do we know about straw and hay? It lights on fire very quickly. So when your soul goes back in, it's going to light up on fire. Okay, and so they're going to basically suffer during Tchiyat HaMitim. They will come back, but they'll come back with suffering. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're going to get to what caused the sin of the people of that generation. And we're going to see a very similar theme in tomorrow's daf about the people of Sdom. Dor mabul lo nitgeu ela b'shvil tova sheyishpia alem hakadosh baruch hu. What happened? They got arrogant. Why did they get arrogant? It's all because of what God gave them. God gave them everything. And we're now going to take psukim in Eov and say that these psukim refer to the Dor Mabul, which we're going to do the same thing in the next daf with Anshe Sdom, but with different psukim in Eov. These are all from chapter 21 of Eov. Batehem shalom mipachad. Their houses are peaceful. Nobody's scared of anything. Below shevet Eloha alehem. There's no one else ruling over them. Uktiv shelo ibar v'lo yagil. Their oxen will impregnate without falling. Tifalet parato v'lo teshakel. The cows will give birth without miscarrying. Uktiv yishalchu ketzon avilehem. Their children will send their children out like the sheep, meaning they don't need anyone to watch them. Everything's safe. V'yaldehem yirakedun. Their children will dance. Uktiv yesu b'tofu machol v'yisma'u l'kol ugav. They're going to take musical instruments and be dancing and happy. Uktiv yivalu yemehem b'tovu shnotam b'neimim. They will enjoy their days with good and their years with singing. There's a bit of an issue here. There's a kri uktiv with yivalu yichalu. Okay, I'm not going to go there though. Uktiv, because we'll never finish the daf. Uberega sha'ol yechatu. Okay, now it says there, and the moment of sha'ol yechatu, they'll be destroyed. Vehi garma la'el sur mimenu v'dat rachecha lo chafatznu ma shadai kinavdena ma no'il kinifga bi. Okay, and that caused them to say this pasuk, which is in that chapter of Eov, about basically saying, leave us, we don't care about your ways. Who is God that we need to worship him? And what will help us, kinifga, that we pray? Okay, it's useless. We have everything we need. And they continue to say, Amru, here's the description of what they said to God. Klum srichim anu lo ela. Now, this isn't a pasuk anymore. This is the drasha. What did they say to God? Klum srichim anu lo ela litipashal kshamim. What, we need a little bit of rain from him? Yes, anu naharot umayanot shanu mustapkim mehem. We have streams and all rivers. We don't need God to give us that. Amar kadosh baruch hu b'tova shishpati lahem. With all the good I gave you those waters. I gave you everything. Ba machisinoti uba nidanotam. With all the beautiful things I gave you, you're getting me angry. With that, I will destroy you. And that's why it says here, we're going to darshan this pasuk. I am now going to bring the flood, water. Okay, now, what's a flood if not water? You don't need the word water. Why does it say water? It's all on account of the water, because you basically said, oh, the water, we have water, we don't need you, but I gave you the water. Rabbi Yossi Amar, it's because of their eyeball, which looked like water. Okay, so now why does it look like water? First of all, ayin also is a stream. There's a connection there, and it looks like water because they're always right. Water comes out of the eye. We tear. Now, what's the problem of the eye? The eye sees, and seeing things causes people to sin, particularly when it comes to znut and inappropriate behavior with women. They took women from all they chose, right? This goes back again to the section about the Bnei Elohim and Benot HaAdam. They took whoever they wanted, right? Even though, again, it's very hard to understand all the connection with that story, because that's a story of people in the above coming down and mating with people in the below, or also sort of like messing up the way God created the world. It's a whole interesting, unique section. Lots of ways people understand it. It's really hard to understand. But anyway, again, because it preceded the flood section, so we assume this is connected. Lefichach danotam b'mayim shedome legalgal ha'ayin. Okay, so therefore they get judged with water that is like the eye, which water streams out of. Shenemar nivkuu kol mayanot tahom rabbah v'arubot hashamayim niftachu. Right, again it says all the mayanot tahom rabbah opened up, right, and they arubot hashamayim niftachu, and they get punished with water. This is like we always say, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Dor mabul rabah kilkalu. Now we're going to take that same pasuk of Tahom Rabbah. Why does it say great depths? It could have just said depths. So they say, well, the rabah kilkalu, rabah nidonu. Again, measure for measure. They sinned in a major way, and therefore they were punished in a major way. Berabah kilkalu shene'amar vayal ki rabah ra'at adam. Right, again, end of Parshat Breshit, right before Noach. God saw that Rabbah Ra'at Adam. It was great how bad the things were. Uberabani donu shneamar, as I said, kol mayanot tahom Rabbah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to say, now we didn't get to this yet, but we're going to see later that when the depths opened up and all that, it was a lot of boiling water. And now one of the other themes of what we're going to do today is explain all sorts of things that exist in the world that we're going to trace back to that time. Okay, it's like we've seen this before, like why is this like that? And it's because of something that happened way back when. So now they're going to say this explains basically why there's hot springs, because the hot springs are left over from the flood. Okay, and now they're going to mention that's why we have these 3 hot springs. Okay, obviously there's more in the world, but that's what they knew of. So Shanish Teirumehem, Blu'a de Gader, Chamei Tveria, right, if you've ever been, also in Chamak Gader, also in Chamei Tveria, and Eina Rabati of Biram. Okay, also in Biram there is. Okay, so basically that explains why there's hot springs. Ki shchit kol basar kol haaretz. So now what did they do so bad? What's kol basar? All the people, right? It's not just all the people, it's all the living things sin. So what does that mean? Okay, everything got mixed up. Okay, kind of like the Bnei Elohim Benot Adam, the people, right? The angels from above came and mated with the people from below, and it was all kind of off. Also, they now attribute that to things going on earth, that people were mating with animals, domesticated with undomesticated, right? Everyone was kind of mixed breeding. It was kind of a big mess, and again, against the Sidrei Bereshit, the way the world was created, it was supposed to be in a particular way, they were going against that. Amar Rav Abba Bar Kahana, B'kulam Chazru, again, we're going to have a descriptive, why does this exist today? All of them went back to mating with their own, Hutz mi Tulshamei, except for the Tulshamei, whatever that is, that now mates with others, okay? Can't remember if, right, they say it's a type of bird, okay, and it's mentioned in Masechet Chulin. So the Tulshamei basically is a bird that mates with other beings. I don't know what. Okay. Vayomer Hashem l'Noach, Ketz kol basar ba lefanai. So now the question is, why does God decide at that moment? What threw things? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Because they were involved in all sorts of things, as we see. They say, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, bo rei kama gadol kocha shel Hamas. This is right. How great how terrible really in greatness is the power of Hamas, of robbery, okay, theft. And that's what the people were involved in. That's what threw things, right? That was the straw that broke the camel's back. They were doing everything wrong. Until they started stealing, right? They didn't get judged for destruction. And there it's very clear in the pasuk, because the land was full of Hamas, of stealing, then they destroyed the land. Hamas kam l'mater resha. Okay, the Hamas got up as this is a bit of a hard pasuk to explain, but the Hamas kind of stood up as a staff. Lo mehem v'lo mehamonan v'lo mehamamam v'lo noah bahem. It's a bit of a weird pasuk, but not from them, not from their masses, their multitudes, not from any of them, and there will be no wailing. Nihi vabechi, that's like Nihi always goes with crying. Nobody will cry for them. So now we have to explain this pasuk. Amar Rabbi Elazar melamed shezakaf kemakel ba'amad lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like the robbery had enough. Like it's enough that they're doing this. So it stood up before God. Amar lefanav Ribono shel olam lo mehem. I don't have anything to do with them. Lo mehamonam, not from their masses. Lo mehamamam, not from anyone from there. And lo noah bahem, and no one's going to cry for them. Okay, meaning they should all be wiped out. There's thing in parentheses, we're going to skip it, but it's really said in the next line. Tana's Bei Rabbi Yishmael, Af al Noach nechtach sardin, ela shematzach chen be'enei Hashem. Even Noach, and where does they get that from? Because lo noha behem, meaning lo noach behem. Noach also won't be among them, meaning Noach should be wiped out also. But what happened? The last minute, Noach matzach chen be'enei Hashem. There's two ways to read this, right? Either everyone was supposed to be destroyed except Noach, and Noach matzach chen be'enei Hashem. But what they basically say is, it sounds like God is upset that he created all of them, including Noach, but Noach matzach chen be'enei Hashem. Okay, so first Noach was supposed to be destroyed, but then he did something to find favor in God's eyes, and he was saved. Okay, God is upset that he made man in the world in the land. Some people say this is darshaned because it also says nichamti ki asitim, right? And they're psukim right next to each other. So why did I have to say it twice? Nichamti ki asitim means I'm upset I created them. Why does it also say v'yinachem Hashem that he created? And what is v'yinachem? Yinachem has two connotations. Yinachem could be regret. It could also be like linachem is to console someone, which means it's a positive word. So now, question is this a positive word, is a negative word? We're going to have two different interpretations. I'll already tell you that it's very confusing how to understand this. There's many different interpretations of how to read these lines. Because it's very hard to figure out the simple reading. Whenever it's hard to figure out the simple reading, there's multiple interpretations. When Rav Dimi came from Israel, he said, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yafeh asiti shetikanti lahem kvarot ba'aretz. Okay, I'm going to go with one interpretation just to keep it simple instead of trying to give you a few different ones. God was pleased with himself that until this point, God had given them kvarim ba'aretz, that God had had people die one at a time and not all en masse. Because when people die en masse, then it could be righteous people will be killed. But instead, God kills the people when they're deserving of death. My mashma, how do you get that v'yinachem is God was happy with something? Tivhacha. And basically, it's going to create a switch, right? That's how God did it until now, but now God's going to do it differently and kill them all at once. This is with Yosef. When Yaakov dies and the brothers are all worried that Yosef is going to kill them, right? He calms them down basically, and it's a positive word. So then others say, no, what it means is God was upset. And as God was saying, it's not good that I'm about to bring the Mabul and destroy them all at once, because then I'm not allowing them the opportunity to do tshuva. Okay? That's another possible way of reading this. K'tiv hacha v'yinachem, u'k'tiv hatam v'yinachem Hashem al ha'ra asher diber la'asot la'amo. Right? God regretted the bad that he decided to do this in the Cheda Egel. He was going to destroy them all, and then he regretted it. So it must be regret, right? God regretted that he had already decided to bring the Mabul. But again, it's not a simple reading, and there's different ways of reading this. So just so you know. And anyone who's interested can read different interpretations. Noach, this is the very famous, Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dorotav, right? He was a righteous person. He was complete or good in his generation. What does it mean in his generation? You could have just said he was tamim. Why do you have to say in his generation? It doesn't say that by other people who are good. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, famous machloket Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish, b'dorotav v'lo b'dorot achirim. In his generation, but he wouldn't have been in other generations. In other words, he was only good because he was living in a generation of terrible people. So compared to them, he looked good. Rish Lakish Amar b'dorotav v'koshkem b'dorot achirim. If he was good when he was living with bad people, could you imagine how great he would be if he was in a positive, encouraging environment? He would have been a star. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Mashal de Rabbi Yochanan Lama Davar Domeh. So let's talk about the Mashal of Rabbi Yochanan. What is this like? Right, we'll give you an example. You have a barrel of wine that's in a cellar full of vinegar, which smells bad. Right? The wine doesn't have the best smell, but compared to all the vinegar, it has a great smell. Amar Rabbi Yoshaya, Mashal Derish Lakish, right? And if it was in a cellar full of wine, you wouldn't have even smelled it. Mashal Derish Lakish Lama Davar Domeh. Litzluchit Plaiton Shaita Munachat B'Mkoma Tinofet. According to Rish Lakish, it's like perfume that's in a really smelly place. It already smells nice when it's got all these bad smells around. Imagine you go to a place with terrible bad smells. It's hard to smell the good smell, but it will be noticed. But could you imagine how beautiful it will smell when it's full of in a place with lots of perfumes. So that's the big famous machloket between them. So now we're going to talk about how God wiped out everything. So great question. So we get that the people sin. But what about the animals? Now, of course, we did see before the animals were all engaging in relations with each other, but this obviously doesn't go with that interpretation. And the question is, right, it really describes Hamas as if, it's all the theft. The animals weren't stealing. So what's the story? It's like a person who did a chuppah for his son. Prepared a whole wedding feast. Liamim, very sad. Liamim mate beno. The son dies. Amaru bobeles chuppah. He ruined all the chuppah. He threw out all the food. Said, I don't need this. Amar klum asiti ele b'shvil b'ni. Achshav shemei. Chuppah lamali. What do I need this for? Right? It was all for my son. Didn't I create the animals for humans? Now that humans sin, what do I need this for? Now everything in the dry land died. Okay, it must be only the animals, but not the fish. Fish didn't die in the mabul. This, by the way, you have to wonder if everything was, the water was all hot and burning, why, and boiling, why didn't they die? Maybe, again, different interpretations. Okay, this is a pasuk in Eov, another pasuk in Eov, which we're going to attribute to the people of the Mabul. He's light on the water. Someone who's light on the water, they float, and their portion will be cursed. Okay, Milamech. Now we're going to get into the next section of today's daf, which is what did Noach do before the Mabul to get people to do tshuva? Remember, he built this ark, and there's all this time in between, and he's trying to get people to do tshuva. So, I don't know if this puts me in a certain generation, but when I was a kid, we always used to listen to Bill Cosby and the Teva of Noach. He has a great routine on it. It's like hysterically funny. Anyway, when I thought of this, when I was thinking about this, I was trying to get the people to do tshuva. He talks about the whole, and I don't remember anymore, but I remember growing up with it as a kid. Okay, so now we're going to hear. Noach would rebuke them and say, Asu tshuva, do tshuva. And if not, here's the pasuk. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevi alechem et hamabul. God will bring the mabul, and it'll be full of water. Umakpeh nivlatchem alamayim kizikim. You're going to float in the water because you'll be dead. You'll be floating like flasks of wine, like wine skins of the flasks. Shneimar kalu al pnei hamayim. That's what he means. You're going to float on the water. And everybody will curse their children in your name. You should, well, not their children. They will curse people who deserving curses, right? Or people who people want to curse will use your name to curse. Why did I say children? Because I wanted to compare it to Yisib Chalu and Ephraim and Menashe. We always bless our children in the name of Ephraim and Menashe. When people want to curse, they'll use your name and say you should be cursed like the generation of the flood. That's what will happen to you if you don't listen. The end of that pasuk is Lo Yifneh Derech Kramim. So what does that mean? Okay, what it means they won't clean the path of the vineyard. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, they say the people at the time were doing this. They were cleaning out the path for the vineyard, like taking away all the thorns and all that. Amrulo, they said to Noach, so Noach was trying to get them to do tshuva. They said to him, Mima akeva. Okay, well, why isn't it coming? If it's going to come, let it come today. I don't understand. Why isn't God bringing it? It's like you say you're going to bring it, but it's not here. I have one animal or one, beloved thing I need to take, but I need to get out of you, which means they say this is a reference to Mitushelach. Again, there's different ways to read this, but we're going to assume they're talking about Mitushelach. Mitushelach was good, and God didn't want to bring the Mabul until Mitushelach died. So he was waiting for Mitushelach to die in order to bring the flood. Turning now to Amabed, and remember, it said Lo Nifnei Derech Kramim. When they heard that, they said, Im ken lo nifnei derech kramim. If not, we're not going to clean out for our vineyards, meaning we're not going to take out all the thorns, which means we're not going to take out our sins. And I think they was like saying, oh, well, it's not coming for a while. Why do I need to do anything now? Or maybe they just thought it was a lame excuse, and they just thought God isn't powerful. If he was, he would just bring it right now. He's obviously not bringing it. Darish Rava. My dichtiv lapid buz la'ashtut sha'anan nachon l'moadei regel. It's hard to understand. I'll read the English translation. Contemptible torch in the thought of him that is at ease, a thing ready for he who slips. That's at least one interpretation. So now we're going to try to explain what the drasha on this is. And again, it's going to be about Noach trying to get them to do tshuva. And their response. Okay, lapid is a torch, and it's, I don't know, harsh, they say. So he said to them harsh things. But why booze? It was a lapid booze, because he would say things that were harsh, and they would humiliate him. Say, this is ridiculous what you're saying. They would say, hey, what are you building this ark for? HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevi alechem et hamabul. God is going to bring to you a mabul, a flood. Amru, mabul shel ma. A flood of what? Im mabul shel esh, if it's fire. Now here we're going to get to the word ashtut. So they're going to darshan ashtut as ashashit. Ashashit is a plate. Okay, we're going to talk about a plate of iron. So yesh lanu davar. Oh, sorry, not yet. We're going to get to the plate soon. My mistake. First, we're going to darshan this esh. Im mabul shel esh, yesh lanu davar echad ve'alita shma. We have something to get this, okay? And this goes back to the lapid word. He said about lapid, they said, well, if it's going to be a lapid, we have something against it. We have the alita. The alita is the salamander. If you remember, that they believe that salamanders were not flammable, and they would put on salamander oil, and that would protect them from fire. We've seen this in the Gemara multiple times. So we have a way to protect ourselves. So we're not worried about a flood of fire. Im shamayim humevi, if it's water, well, it could either come from the ground water, right? It could come up from below, or it could come from the heavens. So im in haaretzu, if it's going to humevi, if God's going to bring it from the land, from the ground, yesh lanu ashashiyot shel barzel. We get that word ashashut. Now sha'anan means we're calm at peace. They're basically saying, and to be sha'anan is like you're not worried about anything. So we're saying we're not worried because we have ashashit. That's why it says lashtut sha'anan. We're sha'ananim because we have ashtut. We have these plates of iron that we could just put on the ground and block the water from coming up from the ground. Ve'im sha'anu mechapim behem et haaretz, will cover the land. Im min hashamayim umevi, yesh lanu davar va'akev shmo, okay, it's called akev. That comes from the regel, right? They're raglayim, okay? The akev is the heel. But what they say akev is, or some people say it's ikeshmo, that it's some sort of sponge. And we can sponge up the water. Okay, you would obviously need a gigantic sponge. But anyway, they say we have all these tools to deal with it. We're not worried. Amar lahem, hu mevi mi ben ikvei raglechem. And then he says to them, no, it's coming from between your feet, and there's no way you're going to be able to stop it. Shneimar nachon lemoadei ragel. Tanya, another braita that darshans this nachon lemoadei regel in a different way. Tanya mimea babul kashim kishichvat zera. Okay, they're harsh like semen. Shene'amar nachon lemoadei regel. And regel is often a euphemism for sexual relations, and therefore it somehow has to do with, I know exactly what it means. They're hard like semen, but I guess powerful like semen. Amar Rav Chisda. And here also we're going to see, maybe this is, semen is hot, so maybe also this is connected. Amar Rav Chisda, birotchim kilkalu ba'avera, ubirotchim nidonu. Okay, they sinned with boiling water, meaning they were heated up, and birotchim nidonu. Okay, perhaps the rotchim here is semen. They were involved in licentious behavior, and with birotchim nidonu, they were judged with rotchim. How do we know that the water was boiling, as we saw before, but I mentioned, but we didn't see it. Ktiv hacha vayashoku hamayim, ktiv hatam v'chamat melech shachacha. Okay, so we have vayashoku hamayim, the waters calmed from what? From the heat. Just like the heat of Achashverosh's anger subsided. Okay, so the same thing here. It must be shachacha or vayashoku is a word coming after heat. It's to calm down something that's very hot. Okay, then it says after this whole long period before the Mabul of Noach building the Teva, then it says, right, I think it was 100 years, right, because first it was 500, then 600, if I remember all the details. I forgot to double check them, but anyway, then it says, and in 7 days there was a Mabul. Okay, what were these last 7 days for? We had all this time leading up to it. What are these 7 days? Mativam shel shivada yamin. What was the nature of these 7 days? Right, that then the Mea Mabul came ala Aretz. Amal Rav, we're going to have a number of different interpretations. Remember we said that Metushelach had to die? Well, Metushelach died, and then they needed 7 days for Avelut. From here you learn that the Hespedim, eulogies of a tzaddik, push off bad things. And a pornut lavo, pornut that's about to come. Davar acher, lishivat. Okay, now notice it doesn't say bishivat yamim. That would be proper Hebrew, in 7 days. But it says lishivat. So what does it mean, lishivat? It's a reference to Shiva Yemei Breshit. And what did God do? Shina lehem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Seder Breshit. He changed all the order of Breshit. Okay, kind of references before that the humans changed Breshit, Maaseh Breshit, and messed it up. God now messes it all up. Shaita Chama Yotzet Mimarav Shokap Mizrach. The sun set, right, rose in the west and set in the east. And obviously all sorts of other things. Davar Acher, different explanation. Shekavalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zman Gadol v'achar kach Zman Katan. I like this one a lot. God first gave them a big amount of time and then gave them another small 7 days. One last chance to do tshuva. What did it make me think of? Get emails from Shutterfly all the time. So they tell you, oh, we have, a big sale coming and the date is Sunday, and as if like that's the end. And then Sunday comes, Monday morning, they say, oh, we've extended it for 2 days, right? Because they know that people want to make an album, but maybe didn't finish it, maybe didn't get to it. And then they say, oh, I have another chance. And then they'll do it. And that's exactly what happens here. Tavar Acher, Lishivat Yamim. No, Shivat Yamim is the 7 is always this Olam Haba, like the cycles of 7. Hitimam me'en Olam Haba. He gave them a taste for 7 days of Olam Haba, Kadesh Yedu Ma Tova Manu Mehem, so that they realize what they're missing out on. Mikola Be'ema Torah. Now we're going to get to the animals. Fascinating Gemaras about animals, although we'll get a little sidetracked and then come back to them. Mikola Be'ema Torah Tikach Shiv'a Shivat Ish V'Ishto. 7 of each of the tahor animals, right? There's 7 of the tahor animals, 2 of the non-kosher animals. Ish v'ishto, okay? Husband and wife. So the Gemara says, Ishut lebeima mi'idli. There is no such thing as husband and wife by animals. Amar Shua bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, me'otam shalon evda behem avecha. He only took the ones that worked ish v'ishto, that they were like husband and wife, that they didn't sin at all. Minayada, how did he know? In other words, again, mating with the wrong animals, things like that. How would Noach know? Rav Chisda, we're going to say it was a miracle, meaning, Habiran lepnei teva, you put all the animals before the teva. Kol teva kolateto biyadua shelo nevda behem avera. Kol she'ena teva kolateto biyadua shenevda ba'avera. They would go in, if the teva would accept them, then great. If the door would be sealed shut, it wouldn't let them in, then it would be obvious. Okay, so this happened in a miraculous way, this selection process. Rabbi Avahu Amar me'otana be'im elehen. They would come on their own. Some people think this means they would come totally on their own. In other words, whoever hadn't sinned, those animals would come. Again, miraculous, but a different kind of miracle. Some people think this is connected. It's not that Noach brought them to the teva one by one. The animals came on their own, but then again, the teva would only accept them if they were worthy. Asil teva atse gofer. Make it with trees of gopher. My gopher. What is gopher? This won't really help us. Amrav Ada, Amri Debe Rabbi Shila, Zomav Liga, Va'amri La Gulmush. Okay, one of these 2 trees. Tzohar Ta'aseh Teva. So what is this Tzohar? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Lo Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Noach, Kfa Ba'avanim Tovot U'Margaliot. Okay, take these very beautiful jewels and stones. Kadesh Yihiyu Me'irot Lahem K'Tzoharaim. That's the Tzohar, like Tzoharaim. So it will be like the sun is out in midday. In other words, these will function as your lights. Okay, now why wouldn't they use candles? Well, the idea is that even though there's a window, they're not going to see any light outside because they're not going to be the me'orot, all the sun, moon, like you're not going to see that at all, even through the teva, because it's going to be dark, right? Like in a dark, stormy day, you don't see the sun or the moon. So you're going to need your own internal lighting system to replace the me'orot that God created in the creation. You're going to need to create those in the teva. Again, there's a few different interpretations. Sounds like there'll be a roof that's like a triangular shape, so the water drips off, right? That's how the teva will last. Tachtiim shniyim ushlishim taaseh, right? Different levels. So the Braita says, Tachtiim lezevel, the bottom was for the waist, and Saim lebeima, the middle for the animals, el yonim la'adam. And there was this separation of the different levels. Vayishalach et ha'orev. Okay, so now he sends the raven. Now we're going to get to the raven versus the dove. Amar Rish Lakish, Tshuva nitzachat tishivo orev lenoach. The orev gave a very strong answer to Noach. He said, Amar lo Rab Chasoneni v'atasanitani. Your master hates me and you hate me. Rab Chasoneni, how do I know that? How that God hates me? Minatolim shiva u'minatmiyim shnayim, right? He was offended. I'm the non-kosher. I only got 2. Everyone else got 7. And atasanitani shataminiach mimin shiva v'shalech mimin shnayim. Why would you send me out when there's only 2 of us? You should send out one of the ones that has 7. You must hate me, and you're sending me to my death, right? He was worried about leaving the teva. Im pogea bi sar chama, if the sar of heat or the sar tzina or the cold, like he doesn't know, it's an extreme heat out there, it's an extreme cold out there, I could get killed by the elements. Lo nimtza olam chaser bria achat, you're going to basically wipe out Orvim from the world. Would have been much smarter to take one with 7. And at least there's 6 more left. O shema lishtia tatzarich. Maybe you're interested in mating with my wife. To which Noach answers him at least about that. Oh, amar lo rasha v'mutar li ne'esar li v'ne'esar li lo kol sheken. The one who's permitted to me, my wife, is forbidden to me, and I'm not sleeping with her in the teva, which we're going to see in a minute how we know that. And to those who are forbidden to me in general, what, you think I'm going to sleep with your wife? Of course not. How do we know they were forbidden? Dichtiv, there's a famous drasha also. Notice the separation. Come into the teva, God says, you and your sons, and your wife and your sons' wives. But when they come out of the teva, like that wouldn't be proof enough. But when they leave, come out you and your wife, and your sons and their wives. So that's why they assume it was forbidden for them to have relations. You'll see in a minute they didn't have time for relations, because you'll see why. But Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan learns from here that they were forbidden to sleep with each other. Tanu Rabbanan, there were 3 who did, and this is again explaining why things are in the world. Kelev orev v'cham, kelev nikshar. That's why dogs are on leashes, they say, because they have relations in the teva, they were punished. Orev rak, okay, as far as I understood, the orev, when it mates, it like throws its stuff, like spits it out, okay, like at a distance or something like that. I don't know so much about it. Cham laka be'oro, and this is sounds a little bit racist. It's hard, but in those days you can understand it. Cham, his son was Cush, and Cush is known to have darker skin. And they're saying, right, that was different for them than anything they were used to. So they were saying that was also we've learned the shchir panav, right, to them was considered a bad thing. Okay. Vayishalach et hayona mi'ito le'ot hakalu mayim. Okay, and by the way, just to notice, right, the kelev and the orev notice there's one from the animal category, one from the bird category, and one from the human category, right? Cham being the son of Noach. Now he sends the Yonah, but notice he sends the Yonah me'ito from him, which means they were together. Remember, everything was separate in the teva. So now they're going to say, that the birds, the kosher birds, were with the tzaddikim. Okay, or that the place where pure birds go is with the righteous people, and they must have been with him. You know, we always have this image of the dove with the olive and the leaf and all that. Now we're going to learn something different about it. It'll conjure up a different image in your head, right? So it's like a sign of peace. So now he had a zayin in his mouth. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amra Yonah lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Yimazonotayim merorim kezayit u'mesurim biyadecha. I'd rather have, what he was trying to say is, I didn't like being fed in the teva by humans and dependent on humans to get my food. I'd much rather get my own food, but as we say in Hebrew, listapek b'ma'at, to be satisfied with just a little and maybe something bitter that's not even good tasting, but at least I found it myself. And that's what the Yonah was trying to say. This idea of being satisfied with what you have and not wanting to be dependent on other people. I don't want them sweet like honey. I'd be happy to have sweet food, but not if I have to be fed by humans, right? And again, not be independent. How do we know that alez zayit taraf befiv was his food in his mouth, right? We don't really think of it that he was eating it, right? But in this drasha, yes, which means provide me with the lechem that I need. So that's a famous pasuk, and they connect taraf with to feed. Lemishpachotehem yatsu min hateva. Amar Rabbi Yochanan lemishpachotam velohem. They came out with their families, but this is also very hard to understand, different interpretations, but not them, meaning some of them died in the teva, but their children came out or something like that. A little hard to understand because they weren't supposed to mate in the teva, so how their children come out. Some people explain it different ways. Again, it's a hard line. Amar Rabbi Chana bar Bizna. Here we have, we're going to end with 2 statements. Okay, one is Eliezer spoke to Shem. Okay, Eliezer, the Eved of Avram, speaks to Shem. We're going to get to Eliezer a lot tomorrow in the stone story also. Think about why he's such a central character here in these stories. And then we're going to have a Shem ask a question to Eliezer. It's a fascinating question because it's like, okay, I want to know. You always want to know this. It's like interviewing. What happened? What were you doing in the teva? So he says, so Eliezer says to Shem Rabbah, the great Shem, meaning the one who was the son of Noach, Tiv lemishpotehem yatzum min ateva, atun hechavitun. Right? They say they went out lemishpotehem, which also, by the way, means another way of interpreting it was that they lived like each one in its own space. So now he says, so what were you doing in the teva? Amar le tsar gadol hayad lanu teva. It was really rough. They were basically zookeepers the entire time. They were just feeding animals all day and all night. Some of the animals eat during the day, some of the animals eat at night. That's why I said they had no time for sexual relations. They were too busy. Hi Zakita, lo avayada abba ma'achla. Now there was a Zakit. Our father didn't know what the Zakit was supposed to eat. Yom achad avayativ kapali rimona. One day he was opening a pomegranate. Nafal tolat tamine, a worm came out of it. Achla, and the Zakita ate it. Mikam ve'elach havagava lechizra. Kima la'achla. Every day then after that he would make like a bran, mix it with water, like a porridge kind of thing. And when it got, worms would come out of it, then he would give them to the Zakita. So again, you have to see how much they had to do it. Now we get to another issue. The lion. Had the lion not kill all the other animals? Aryeh ishatazante. He was fed by his fever. Okay, the heat of the fever fed him. What does this mean? So some of them interpret that, we know when you have a fever, you don't really need to eat, right? You barely eat anything. I mean, of course you need sustenance, but the idea is that the fever sustained the lion. The fire of the fever can basically keep you from 6 to 12. 6 to 12 days, Rashi says, or Rashi suggests maybe 6 months to 12 months. Okay, which would fit better with the teva because it was a long time. If it was only up to 12 days, it wouldn't have been able to really help. Or Shina, which is another creature. Found him lying on the side of the teva. Amarle, lo bait mizone, you don't want food? Like, I guess they were giving out the food and you didn't come. Amarle, chazita, have a tree that I see you're really busy. Amina, lo etzari, I don't want to bother you to give me food. You're busy feeding everyone else. Amarle, yehe rava de lo tamut. This is again one of those descriptive, why is it that this creature barely dies, lives a very long life? Because he got a bracha there, that you won't die. This is the type of bird called a chol, and it lives a very long time. And that's why it lives a very long time, because it was blessed by Noach and the Teva, because he was considerate of Noach. Amalei Rav Chana bar Levi. Now we're up to the last part, which is going to lead to a very famous story of Nachum Ish Gamzu. Amar Shem l'Rabba Eliezer. Amar Shem Rabba Eliezer. So now Shem goes to Eliezer and says, Ki atu aleichem alchem Yisrachim arav atun hachi aviditu. When the kings, the 4 kings came to fight against you, what were you doing? So Amar le, how did you do it? Kadosh Baruch Hu Avraham va'ot ve'mimine. God took Avraham, put him on his right. V'avashadinan afra v'avu charve. He would throw dust and it would turn to swords. Gili, he would take straw v'havu gire and it would turn into arrows. Shneimar mizmor l'davinu Hashem la'adoni shev li'mini. Okay, sit to my right. Until I put down your enemies, they will be, you will tread on them. Uchtiv, mihi irmi mizrach. Now, how did he do it? Well, here's a pasuk that they relate to Avram, that he was the one who he irmi mizrach, came from the east. Tzedek yikreu l'raglo, yitem lefanav goyim u'melachim yard. God will put, nations before him, and the enemies will fall, the kings will fall. Yitem ka'afar charbo kekashni daf kashto. And here we have it. He will make the afar into his, the dirt will be his swords, and the straw will turn into his arrows. And that's a reference to the story, which we're going to see a very famous story that comes up with Nachum Ish Gamzu and this special afar that turned into swords. Okay, with that, we finish our daf. So we basically dealt with, for the most part, we had a list in the Mishna of all different categories, groups of people way back in history that don't have a place in the world to come. And then we went through the Dor Mabul. Among other topics we dealt with, are they going to have a portion in, are they going to be resurrected or not? What caused their downfall? What caused the arrogance and and how bad robbery is compared to other things. From there, we got into how did Noach try to get them to do tshuva and what was their response? Why wouldn't they accept it? And what happened with the animals and the teva and how did they deal with them all that time? With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom and B'sorot Tovot.